Okay, we're recording. Good evening. Welcome to episode 2. So, keeping with what we did last time, I'm just going to go through this r/debt subreddit and just going to read like 3 or 4 different stories. Let's do it. Alright, here we go. Let's see what we got here. So, let me pick a good one. Alright, here's one. Capital One card debt by Anna Isabel. Okay. I owe Capital One $12,000. Shameful, I know. I don't know how I let it get this bad. I've been making the minimum payments every month. I mean, that kind of answers your question, doesn't it? She says, I don't know how I let it get this bad. I've been making the minimum payments. That's how you let it get this bad. That's exactly what you did. You made the minimum payments. Maybe you should have paid off your credit card earlier. I digress. I've been making the minimum payments every month, but the interest rates are killing me, and I'm just paying money to keep afloat, and the balance isn't going down. Any advice? I'm at a loss. Okay, I mean, this post is borderline satire because your answer is within your question. She says, I've been making the minimum payments every month. The interest rates are killing me. I'm just paying money to keep afloat and the balance isn't going down. I mean, I don't know really what to tell you here. You're going to have to pay more than the minimum payment, as you know. I understand that's difficult. Of course that's going to be difficult. I mean, the thing with some of these posts, man, is there's just no data at all. You don't say what your income is, what your expenses are. There's virtually nothing that we can do here aside from make really generic advice that may or may not be useful. So, that being said, here's some very generic advice that may or not be useful. So, whatever your current level of income is, you obviously have to be able to set aside some sort of money. I don't know how much. I don't know if it's an extra $100 a month or an extra $1,000 a month. Or an extra $5,000 a month. Completely depends on what your income is. My guess from this is you're probably a lower earner because payments on $12,000 aren't that big. So if I had to guess, you're probably not a very high earner. So that sort of makes sense with the problem that we got here. Now, that being said, the first thing you're going to have to do is just track all your expenses for like a month or so. So I guess what I would do would be, I would track exactly what I spent in every single category, literally write down every single dollar for an entire month. Then at the end of that month, you can put everything that you spend into a little category so that you actually know what you're spending on each category. So if there's literally no money left over at the end of the month and you're not making any dumb purchases at all, you have no choice but to increase your income. I mean, obviously that's easier said than done, but that is also really your only option. I mean, if you have an expensive car, you could sell your expensive car and get a less expensive car. That's a good way to go. I mean, if you got a $40,000 car and you want to sell it for a $7,000 Corolla, that would be a really good idea if that's your situation. But again, we don't have any data, so I don't know if that's your situation or not. I have no idea. I wonder how long you've been making the minimum payments for. That is one of my biggest questions. I mean, to me, I'm most interested in how long it took to rack up that debt. I think that would sort of tell you how bad your expenses are. I mean, if you accrued that $12,000 debt in like 3 to 6 months, you have a huge problem. I mean, you have a huge spending problem. Your expenses are through the roof in comparison to your income. Now, if you've been racking up that $12,000 at, $500 a month over a 2-year period, I could see that. I mean, that might be less of a problem. That's still not good, but that's less of an issue. You're still going to have to basically make rent payments on this thing every month. But just to reiterate, I mean, first thing you got to do is track your expenses like perfectly, flawlessly. You have to write down everything. I mean, maybe you have a really high rent. I don't know if you live in a high cost of living area or not, but maybe you can find an apartment that has lower rent. Or maybe you would be able to get a roommate or move back in with your parents for a short period of time just so that you could tackle the debt. As most of us know, rent and car payments are usually going to be the 2 biggest culprits as far as making you poor. I mean, yeah, there's going out to eat and spending, having a big grocery bill and that kind of thing, but if you have an expensive car and you're spending more money on rent, or if you own a house and you're spending a lot of money on a mortgage, which I doubt, but that could be the case, those are probably going to be your 2 biggest expenses, so I would start there. So if you're spending, $1,400 a month in rent, you might be able to find a place that's like $1,100, so that could be a good start. And then obviously same concept for the car. I don't know if you own a car outright or if you're making payments on a car, but whatever it is that you drive, I mean, unless it's kind of the bare bones, bare minimum of what's safe and reliable, you might be able to sell that and downgrade for something a little bit cheaper, and then you could put those payments towards your credit card. So, I mean, you might be able to free up $500 or $600 just from doing those 2 things alone, which would really help tackle this pretty quick. In addition to that, whatever it is that you do for work, I would start working either a lot of overtime or see if you can get promoted or moved up to like a management position or something. I mean, as far as increasing your income goes, usually the quickest way to do that short term is just to work more shifts. I mean, if your company's paying time and a half for overtime, start working 50 or 60 hours a week. You could pay this off pretty dang quick, man. I mean, really pretty fast. But before I ramble too much, let me just read some of these comments. So, Bitter Dark Coffee says, Gotta make a budget and stick to it. Do any side gigs you can to throw at the debt. Short term, sell anything you don't need. Getting out of debt takes discipline. That's why the budget is so important. So, yeah, I mean, that is pretty much exactly what I said. I mean, sentence for sentence, he says make a budget and stick to it. Check. Great idea. Side gigs, side hustles, try to make more money at your current job. Totally agree. That's going to probably be the biggest or the second biggest thing you can do is just to try to work more so you can make more money. And then also short term, sell anything you don't need. So whether it's your car or a guitar collection or you got a bunch of laptops or something, just maybe find something in your house that you don't use anymore. I guarantee you could at least get money for something. Getting out of debt does certainly take discipline, but I agree. I think that's a really good comment. All right, Older and Super Wiser says, snowball method. Pay minimums on everything and pay off the lowest balance first so you get a win with one gone. Man, I can't read today. Pay minimums on everything and pay off the lowest balance first so you get a win with one gone. Then do the same on the next one. Any additional money you find, whether it's from tax returns or bonus, birthday money, anything, put toward the lowest debt. Guy says, I'm doing that now. Yeah, I think that's a great strategy also. I'm pretty sure when he says the snowball method, he's talking about Dave Ramsey's approach there, which I don't know if that's what Dave Ramsey recommends or not. I think he does. I think that's what he says. But either way, yeah, I agree with that. I would probably prefer to go the route of highest interest rate first. You know, paying off the credit cards with the highest interest rate. But she really only mentions having one credit card. They have $12,000 on Capital One credit card. So I don't really think they're having to pick between multiple different sources of debt. Kind of looks to me like they just have one card, so I would stick with that. I'd start paying that thing off. Tax returns is a good point. We do have tax returns coming up, so that's something I didn't think about. You might get $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 or whatever from your tax return. I mean, that could knock out 30% of your debt right there. So that's a really good point. Let me read one more. All right, call them and see what's available. They sent me an offer to where I'm only paying 55% of my original debt on a plan from $1,300 down to $600. Doesn't hurt to ask. Says, I'm kind of in a similar situation, but not with Capital One. If I may ask, though, what did you specifically say to Capital One when you made the phone call? I might have to try that soon. Did you just say, hey, I can't afford this debt and the interest is killing me? Can we work out a payment plan, or what? This guy says, they actually kept sending me emails about my credit card debt, but I had no choice but to leave it at the time. I couldn't take care of it yet. After a while, they started sending me offers, which included paying less, but a set amount, and on a monthly plan. I guess they were offering everything and anything that could work for me just to knock out the debt. I was genuinely surprised. So, yeah, that's worth a shot, too. I mean, if this guy was able to knock his credit card debt from $1,300 all the way down to $600, I mean, it's like 45% of the original total. So, I imagine you could probably get something off that $12,000. I mean, even if it only knocks it down to like $9,500 or something, you could probably save a couple grand by doing that. Although, I would say the downside to that is you're probably going to screw your credit score up. I mean, this guy basically said he stopped making payments. So the only reason that he was really offered that lower pay was because he'd already missed payments. So, I mean, the dude basically destroyed his credit to save like $700. I would not do that. Even though $12,000 is still quite a bit more than $1,300, that's not enough money where you want to absolutely jack up your credit just to fix that. I mean, saving a couple $1,000s and destroying your credit is going to bite you in the long run. Please don't do that. That's a horrible idea. Don't do that. What I would do is you could always call them and ask if they have some sort of plan where maybe they could reduce your rates a little bit or they could just make the total balance a little bit lower. I don't know. I don't know if they'll do that or not. I know sometimes they'll do that at places like doctor's offices if you don't have insurance. But it's worth a shot. But don't miss payments. Okay, I'm going to read another one. All right, let me find a different one. And I'm already sore from talking. All right, this one is Student Debt Dilemma by Honest Wing 3999. We have no debt other than a mortgage and $40,000 of my wife's non-private student debt. We currently pay the bare minimum, which is around $250 a month. It has barely gone down in years. We make good money, but we aren't rich and don't have match savings due to childcare. We probably could pay off a big chunk of it with our tax return, though by no means all of it, of course. Meanwhile, we work very hard. I am also a part-time graduate student on a full-time scholarship, but if I take any additional classes, which I would have to pay for, I can graduate early. My problem is what to spend money on. I want to be debt-free, but my main aversion to chunking down the student debt is that I have a horrible suspicion that the day I eventually pay it off will be the day some or most of it gets forgiven. I know that's unlikely, but it's not impossible. It just seems kind of silly to pay off student debt that could feasibly be suspended or forgiven and isn't a horrible burden when there are more immediate concerns. Alternatively, I can spend our money on taking my extra class and graduating early, or save it. That just feels wrong with this student debt. Okay, it's a good question. This one's a lot more intricate and complex than the last question. I like this. So, kind of like what I said last time, the problem with these posts a lot of the times is they don't include their income, And he also doesn't include how much it would cost to go back to school. Honestly, those are the two most important variables here. So without that information, I kind of have to stick to general feedback again because I can't give really specific feedback without that info. So if you happen to be watching this and you're planning on making one of these r/debt posts in the future, please try to include information that's helpful. Because, man, I swear, this is not easy. I'm going to have to guess on how much money you make. I'm going to have to guess on how much these classes are going to cost. And I don't know how useful that's going to be. But I digress. Let's try it anyway. Okay. So your wife is $40,000 in debt because she has non-private student loans. You're currently paying the bare minimum on that, which is $250 a month. Okay, you say it's barely gone down in years. Of course it's barely gone down. You're making the minimum payments. It's not going to keep going down. It's going to stay the same or go up eventually. So you also say that you make good money, but we aren't rich. Okay, I'm just going to guess that your household income is around 100 grand. Maybe you and your wife both make 50. So you also have to set aside a decent amount for childcare. That kind of changes things to me. So if you didn't have children, I would say if you could do the college courses and graduate early and not spend a ton of extra money, like $20,000 or less to graduate early, I think that would be a fair thing to do. I mean, that would make sense to me. But having children, especially in like the childcare age, probably not necessarily the best idea. I would say you might be better off prioritizing saving more money. I would say the only way that really makes sense is if you're making, say, $40,000 or $50,000 now, and as soon as you graduate, you're going to be making like 100 or 120 or something. That might make sense. I mean, going into a little bit more debt short term so that you can have a much bigger paycheck, to me that makes sense. But again, it's so variable without knowing what your major is, what you currently do for work. I mean, these type of generic posts, I just don't really know exactly what to focus on. So that's sort of the dichotomy there. I mean, those are sort of the two situations, right? Either you go into more debt and you get a job that doesn't pay you a lot more, and I would say even if you didn't have kids, that's probably not the best idea, but with having the responsibility of having to take care of kids, I would not do that. I'd focus more on picking up extra shifts and just working more, saving more money, paying off your debt, doing what you can. I mean, you already have a mortgage, so you have a house, so that's good. So you're going to have some home appreciation. Your mortgage payments aren't going to go up over time, so you've already locked in a house. I think that's a good thing, especially when you have children. Not having to worry about rent going up every year. That's a pretty big positive, so that's good. That's a win. That's going in the pro category. So that's option one, right? You go back to school, and your paychecks might get a little bit bigger, but maybe it's not that big of a difference. And now on top of that, your monthly payments are going to be higher because you're now probably $20,000 to $60,000 more in debt with your own student loans than you were in the past. So you really need to question what the difference in salary is going to be. If it's a $40,000 or $50,000 raise, I think you could probably justify that so long as your wife's salary is able to support you and your children while you go back to school. But, even that's a tough decision that I think you would have to consider a lot. But, I could at least be in favor of doing that, though. I think if your pay is going to get at least 50% bigger, that might make sense. If your pay is going to double, I think that could really make sense. Like I said, if you're going from, 50 or 60 grand to 100 or 120,000, I'd say that's probably worth it. Even if you have to go an additional $40,000 in debt, that's probably going to work in your favor long term. Certainly if you're planning on working for another 30, 40, 50 years. That's definitely going to pay off long term. But that's the big question. What is your current major? What is your current job? How much money are you making now? How much money are you going to make if you graduate? So, on a side note, as far as the loans being forgiven thing, man, that is such a hard gamble to play. It's the same. To me, that's kind of akin to trying to time the market. The old adage is time in the market beats timing the market, which literally just boils down to we're not very good at guessing when the stock market's going to go down and when it's going to go up, at least not short term. So doing the same thing with whether or not your loans may or may not be forgiven, dude, unless you have some sort of specific plan, like, you're planning on working 10 years for a government agency or for a federal employer or something, your loans probably aren't going to get forgiven. There's always a chance. It could happen. It's going to depend on the administration at the time. It depends on tons of different variables that you're not going to be able to predict. I would not live your life like that. Now, if you had a bunch of other debt, especially if it was high interest debt, I would agree with you where you say, you could spend your money on other things, or that might not be this immediate concern. You said that you don't have any other debt, so I would disagree with that. I do think it's an immediate concern, even if it doesn't feel like it's this emotionally heavyweight thing. If that's your only debt besides your mortgage, if you tackle that, you don't have any debt at all. It's a huge win, man. So I'd probably be picking up extra shifts, working a bunch of time. So those are the things that I would consider. Let me read some of these comments here. All right. What does she do for work? Is PL forgiveness a possibility? I'm assuming PL means private loan. So again, I don't know if private loan forgiveness is an option. I don't know. I know that there's differences between forgiveness, whether it's like a federal public loan versus something like a private loan. I'm sure there's differences in what would classify as a forgiveness or what would constitute being eligible for forgiveness. I don't know what the differences are, but I'm assuming there are probably some differences. That's a question for your financial loan officer. The only way I'm not paying off these debts is if I can have in writing a guarantee that the student loans are going to be forgiven and I have an exact time frame and what I need to do with a perfectly laid out plan on how to get there, right? If my loan officer tells me, you're going to have to work 10 years or whatever as a federal employee and you've never worked as a federal employee before, so now all of a sudden you're looking for federal jobs and you're wondering if you can stay around for 10 years and all that for 40 grand, I would not go that approach, dude. Now, conversely, if you talk to your loan officer and they say, hey, just a year or two of work for this company and they'll forgive your loans, that's probably a really good option. I'd really heavily look into that. But then again, do you have to go back to college to do that? Can you do that while you're in college? Does it make sense to take on more student loans just so you can try to go through this process again to have your loans forgiven? I don't know. Seems kind of complex to me, dude. Again, this isn't out-of-state medical school. You're not $500,000 or $600,000 in debt. It's really not that bad, and as long as you're not planning on doing that, worst case scenario, you're probably going to be spending similar to what your wife did, so that makes it about $80,000. Still definitely worth looking into as far as student loan forgiveness goes, but, it's not a super gonna ruin your finances type thing if you can't get it forgiven. Anyway, back to the comment. This guy says, she's a teacher, but to qualify for private student loan forgiveness, you have to make income-based repayments. Her income is low, but mine is high. Okay, her income is low, but mine is high. Dude, that really changes things. I wish I would have read that comment first. You said, we make good money, but we aren't rich. We don't have much set aside for savings. Unless you're able to work full-time at your current job and go back to college, that really throws a wrench in your plan, dude. You could very well burn 70% of your income by doing that. That just doesn't seem like a responsible idea at all. Even if you didn't have kids, that seems like a bad idea. I would not do that, bro. This guy says income-based repayments aren't required for private student loan forgiveness. Either income-based or standard repayment plan is required. Both are much more expensive in terms of premiums. So, again, I can't really comment on that. I don't know much about private or public student loan forgiveness. I don't know much about student loans in general. So, I'm not really going to comment on that. There's nothing of substance I can add. So, next guy says, private student loan forgiveness is not an option. Then I would assume that it will not be forgiven. Although the president did suggest forgiving $10,000 in student loans, this did not end up being accepted. There is no indication that this type of forgiveness will happen in the near future. Yeah, that's my whole point. There's no guarantee that your loans are going to get forgiven, even if the president says that it's going to happen. It's not necessarily going to happen, and it didn't in this case. I remember when Biden said something about everybody's going to get $10,000, or eligible students are going to get $10,000 off their student loans. Well, that didn't happen. That bill didn't pass, so even with the president endorsing something like that, it's still not likely to happen, and the administration may very well change in the next couple months, so I don't know what to tell you, dude. Like I said, I would not think too hard about the student loan forgiveness, and I would certainly not wait around for somebody to forgive it for free. You might be able to work your way off forgiving some of those loans, but I would not just sit around and wait. It seems like a really, really bad idea. Jacks up the economy, by the way. Don't do that. It isn't easy. Try to put any extra money toward it. Bonus, tax returns, side hustle jobs. It's a grind. Stay after it. You can do it. This guy says, sure, but should I? What if the debt is canceled? My wife's a teacher, so I can easily foresee a situation where her debt is canceled someday in the future. Unfortunately, we cannot do private student loan forgiveness because we cannot make income-based repayments because I earn too much. Guy says, I don't know, your call. I know I would assume no one is going to pay them except you. Yeah, man, I think Happy One 1426 has the right attitude. I would not assume that anybody's going to pay your loans. I just wouldn't. To me, that just seems like such a passive way to live your life. Don't just sit around and wait, man. There's no way your wife likes that attitude. You have good butt points, but think of bad things happening. What is English? You have good points, but I think bad things could happen, I guess is what he's trying to say, such as losing a good paying job, economy collapsing again. A lot of things can happen. Thinking 10 years from now and having kids if that's... Why am I even reading this comment? Think of 10 years from now, having kids, this is not a good idea, bad plan, things can happen, you might get sick. I'm not going to keep reading this comment. Alright. I have 3 kids. Another thing is realistically to pay off student loan, it would mean no vacation for several years. Another sad thing to give up. Sorry, dude, but oh well, grow up. That's part of life. Your wife incurred debts that she knew she'd have to pay back. Refusing to pay more than the bare minimum and stating, yeah, no vacations, etc. is pathetic. Couldn't agree more, dude. Stop living like a leech. I just don't have sympathy for people like this. I don't know, man. If you want to spend the rest of your life living like a leech, you do you. That just makes me sad. I have probably been filming for like 30 minutes. Alright, let's do another one. Alright, Think Valuable 3094 says, tax debt, California and IRS. So I owe $15,000 in tax debt to IRS and California State. I have $2,000 to pay up front. Should I do a payment arrangement or apply for a personal loan to pay them both off? I'm worried about penalties and interest for both. I have good credit. Wouldn't that help me get a low APR? I don't know about that, dude. That doesn't sound like a good idea at all. Let me look up the interest rate for tax debt to the IRS. I don't feel like it's probably that high. Interest rate for IRS tax debt. Okay. So it says for individuals, the rate for overpayments and underpayments will be 8% per year compounded daily. So you're looking at an 8% interest rate. I don't know if you know much about private loans, but most of the time you're going to be paying more for private loans. This seems like a really freaking bad idea to me. You're probably going to get significantly higher than an 8% for your private loan. So you would be far worse off doing that. Like, far worse. You might be paying 15 or 20%. Let me look that up. Let's do average interest rate for private loan debt. Yeah, so the average, just the average is 11.56%. Now, I know you said you have good credit, but dude, it's not like that's going to bring you down to 4%. You might go from 11.5 down to 10.5. This is a terrible idea. No, I mean, it doesn't look like you did much research at all, because even just 1 minute of researching makes it seem like that's a really bad idea. You say, I'm worried about penalties and interest for both. You shouldn't get any penalties as long as you're making the payments. And the interest is probably right at 8%. So, I mean, I'm sorry that you have to pay 8%. That sucks, but that is what it is. You're not going to do better than that. You're not going to negotiate with the IRS either. It's not like they're going to lower your rate. So yeah, I would do a little bit of research. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like there's no chance that you're going to refinance at a better rate. So I don't think that's going to work. All right, let me read a couple comments here. So BP Down 123 says, the IRS charges, I think, 8% interest on installment plans, which is likely considerably better than a personal loan rate. That's exactly what I'm saying. The penalty amount that you would get charged depends on why there is an underpayment. If you are paying part of the amount you entered on your tax return, the IRS charges 0.25% monthly. If the IRS concludes that you did something wrong, they can charge you more. You can always ask to have penalties removed. Often, if you made an honest mistake or if money is tight at the moment, the IRS will waive penalties. But you have to ask. They don't do it automatically. For what it's worth, the IRS only enters into auto debit arrangements, no credit cards. I've had installment payments with the IRS. They are easy, truthfully. Other than a 6-month summary mailed to you, you never hear a peep from them so long as the bill is paid as agreed. They don't file a levy or anything. Just make sure you keep good records, because if you itemize deductions, you might be able to get eligible deductions in future years. The only other thing to be aware of is that if you enter into an agreement, the tax bill is set in stone. You cannot change it or dispute it afterwards. So that's some good information. I think that's a good point about having the penalties removed. If you're able to get in contact with the IRS and just say that you maybe made an honest mistake, or that, like this guy said, you just don't have the money to be paying penalties right now, maybe they'll cut you a break. Like that guy said, apparently they don't do it automatically. I wouldn't figure that they would do it automatically, so I would get in contact with the IRS and see if there's anything you can do to get those payments adjusted, or to at least get the penalties knocked off. Yeah, seems like a pretty cut and dry situation to me. I mean, you owe the IRS a certain amount, you're just gonna have to start making payments and pay the IRS. I would completely forget the whole personal loan thing. So then the OP responds, we made estimated tax payments, but greatly underestimated. We never owed taxes. We also never really got refunds. I'm taking $200 refund tops. I've been diligent to file every year. This past year, my husband got a massive raise and it raised our tax brackets. I think I'll put a few thousand we have toward IRS and then get into a payment arrangement. Yeah, that seems like the right thing to do there. It sort of seems like she's dropped the idea of the personal loan route, which is good. Like we've talked about, that seems to be the right approach. So yeah, that seems like a good plan. Good job. Best of luck. All right, let me do one more short one here. All right, this one's called What Should I Try to Pay Off First by SVCADM253. This one's actually not that short, but we'll be quick. I'm sure you've seen it over and over again here. I got myself into a bind with credit cards and a personal loan, and I'm running out of money each paycheck to keep up with it. I just want some wiggle room so I can start paying more on the credit cards, but it feels like I don't have it. I've been using YNAB, but need to get better about tracking it in there. I also have very little savings. I paid a good chunk of my bonus this year towards credit cards, and I put some money into savings so I don't end up needing the credit cards. Simply put, I want to reduce a monthly payment so I can start paying more on other things. I have too many monthly payments. So monthly take-home pay is roughly $3,500. First of all, thank you for including valuable information in this post. You are literally the first person that included their salary. Thanks. Okay. Monthly take-home pay, roughly $3,500. Car is $270 a month with a balance of about $3,500. Interest rate at 1.9%. That's not bad at all. Credit card number one, $16,000, 30% interest, paying like $300 to $400 minimum payment. Credit card number two, $8,000, 30% interest, paying $250 to $300 minimum payment. And credit card number three, $6,000 in debt, 7% interest, paying like $90 to $100 minimum payment. Then we have a personal loan debt at $635 a month, balance of $14,000, interest at 4.8%. It's actually relatively low interest for a personal loan, so that's not too bad. All these payments leave like $600 to $700 after my mortgage payment for literally everything else. I have a cell phone bill needed for work, groceries, transportation, and pets. And before anybody says anything, the pets are non-negotiable. I'd rather eat rice every day. That's good. I respect that. Agreed. Two-person household with mostly single income, by the way. My husband is his dad's caretaker and doesn't get paid a lot to do it, and his contributions have mostly been going toward groceries and food. I have heard advice to start with the highest interest card and to pay that off first, but those are so high right now that it seems impossible with the cash going in and out right now. What I want to do, which might be stupid, is pay off the car loan because I will be able to do that very soon. Then I have $270 to put toward the next one, but that is the lowest interest rate. I want to get rid of the $635 payment for the personal loan because it's killing me. I've stopped putting things on credit cards and have been cutting things like subscription services and eating out. Mostly the credit cards were used for vet bills and recurring payments like subscriptions that just got out of hand. And sometimes expenses that I just did not have enough paycheck to make. I feel lost. I'm embarrassed because I let this happen again. After getting a personal loan to fix my problem in the first place, I don't want to go back to my credit card unit and say, hey, I screwed this up, please help. It's a tough situation. Yeah. So I guess first I'll start with what they said. So what I want to do, which might be stupid, is to pay off the car loan. Okay. To me, that depends entirely on how quick you can do that. So how much do we have? We had a balance of $3,447. So you basically said that after all the bills are paid, you've got about $700 to live on, including like groceries and phone and stuff. So you have almost no money left over. Maybe I'm missing something here, but to me, even paying off that little debt of $3,447, I mean, at the rate you're going, that could take you a year. You talk about paying it off really soon, but hell, unless you're planning on either selling the car or selling something else, I don't see how you have enough money left over to pay that stuff. To be honest with you, even to address your question of which thing you should pay off first, I honestly don't think that's the biggest problem. I think if it gives you the momentum of paying debt off to pay the car off first, I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do. It kind of pains me a little bit to pay off the lowest interest rate debt first. I don't love that. I mean, yeah, I understand that it's the lowest balance, but man, that's a little sketchy considering that you have 30% interest on two of your credit cards. Paying off 1.9% interest seems an egregiously bad idea. But man, if that's the thing that gives you the momentum to free you up to start making other payments, it's not a bad idea, I guess. I mean, it's certainly better than doing nothing or changing nothing, but I really don't think that's your problem. I think your problem is your income. I understand that the husband has to be his dad's full-time caretaker, but is he not able to work at all? He can't do part-time work from home or work at a grocery store part-time just so that he can get a little bit of a paycheck going and also some store discount? I mean, those are probably the two things that I would look into right away. If he could even work 15 or 20 hours a week as a cashier or a bagger at a grocery store, that's an extra couple $100 a week, and you're going to get some discounts at your groceries. I'm glad that the caretaking thing pays some, but with that kind of money, this is just not going to work. I mean, your total balance for all of these things, you got 14, 6, 8, 16. I mean, you're talking like $25-something thousand in total debt. You're not going to put a dent in this with the amount of money that you have. And all that said, this is just a standard month. If you have an unplanned expense or a medical bill or something, or your pets get sick, you have to make another big vet payment, you're drowning. You are drowning with your income to debt ratio. This is not going to work, short term or long term. You really have no choice but to get a higher income. So if your husband is literally unable to pick up extra shifts, you have no choice but to be the one that does it. You're just going to have to bite the bullet and start working more. Obviously, none of these people really mention how many hours per week they work because I don't know. I guess that's not usually really that relevant, but I think it is in this case. If you're only working 40 hours a week, you need to be working 55 or 60 hours a week and be getting that time and a half overtime. That is literally the only way you're going to come up with this. And depending on where you work at, eat at work. Find either cheap or free food that you can eat while you're at work so that you don't have to come home. You don't have to buy groceries. You don't have to do dishes. You can just spend your time working. That's really the only advice I have for you in this case. I mean, I know that's kind of underwhelming advice and might be harsh feedback, but there's nothing you can do to pay these debts off. The best you can do is maybe an extra couple $100 at a 1.9% interest rate. That's just not going to change anything, dude. And let's be quite frank here, even if you get that extra $270 a month freed up in cash flow, you're still just one bad unplanned expense from going under. Even with an extra $270 a month, you're just one bad expense from being screwed. I think it's fine if you want to put your money toward the car payment. You could probably pay it off pretty quick if you sold some stuff and you got an extra job or you start picking up extra shifts. And, the extra money that you get from your extra shifts is going to compound with the extra money that you get from paying off that debt. So that'll help. But to me, this is just pretty cut and dry. If you can't increase the amount of money that you're getting on a monthly basis, this is not going to go anywhere. Eventually, some sort of unplanned expense is going to come up and you're going to end up in more debt. So I'm sorry that you're in this situation, man. That really does suck. I would really, really, really try to get your husband to work some. Any little bit's going to matter a lot. You need to be working more also, unless you're already working 70 hours a week, in which case, let's hope that's not the case. You need to be working more. Again, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. This is not an embarrassing situation. It's a scary situation. I've pretty much said everything I can say. Make a budget. Spend as little money as you can possibly spend in the next year or two. Don't go out to eat. Don't buy anything. Don't do anything at all. Just work. So, again, that's a real bummer. Anyway, let me read one or two of these comments and we'll wrap it up. So, SpareLuck88 says, 1, make a budget. You need to know for certain what money is left over each month. I think they meant to say. You need to know what money is left over for each month. You need to have your budget done. There are plenty of apps that will automatically track for you if you struggle with manually tracking expenses. 2, you got to cut up the credit cards if you haven't already done so and remove them from your life digitally also. Number 3, priority of payments. It does sound like paying the car off will free up room to put towards the other debts. I would pay the car ASAP and then use the money to follow the debt avalanche method or something more custom. I would prioritize the debt like this. Car, credit card 1, credit card 2, credit card 3, personal loan. Sure. I hear you that it hurts to pay that much monthly to the personal loan. Try to mentally view the credit card minimums, totaling around $700 a month, as a second personal loan with a much worse interest rate. That might help you rationalize paying off the high interest balances first. And number 4, saving, depending on your existing balance. You might need to cushion your savings account just to prevent additional debt. Not sure what this means for you, but set a goal of what your bare minimum emergency fund looks like. So yeah, I think there's plenty of good advice in there. I still think him not mentioning the income is a problem. I hope you don't disagree with me, but I don't see any way around it. This isn't as cut and dry as what SpareLuck88 here says. You're still going to have to increase your income. Just making a budget and cutting up your credit cards isn't going to do it. It might prevent you from going deeper into debt, but that's not going to solve your problem. Anyway, that's all I'm going to do today. I'm not going to spend any more time. I literally feel like my voice is hoarse from talking this much. I got to get used to these longer form videos. This is exhausting. Anyway, I really like these longer form videos that I've been making lately. They're way more interesting than that short form crap that I was making beforehand. If you thought this was informative or entertaining, let me know. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see something like this in the future. I'd love to hear any feedback in the comments or anything, but yeah, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate you watching the video and hope you have a good day. Thanks.